Welcome to the Digital Dream Off the Ground podcast. This is your host, Asif Ali, and today is a loser fucking Monday. Oh my God. I mean, the Niners just completely collapsed. They played like absolute garbage yesterday, and I don't even know if I should be wearing this shirt. I don't know. But anyways, so to recap, obviously the Niners went into Denver on Sunday night. So Russell Wilson, who had basically been struggling all year with the Broncos offense, and he pretty much continued to struggle last night, was basically, in a ready state to basically get upset on Sunday night, right? And I don't know. I mean, let me just kind of go through these numbers first. So I'm gonna pull up the stats. Um, 1 second. Okay, total yards, Niners had 267 to the Broncos 261. Passing yards, Broncos had 160 to 179. Niners 160 over. So Niners basically had more yards passing and more total yards. Rushing yards, the Broncos had 101 to Niners 88. Yards per play, 5.1 to 3.7. So Niners basically won the offensive matchup when it came to yards gained and when it also came to the yards per play, right? First downs, 13 Niners, 14 to the Denver. Third down efficiency, this is a key metric. Niners were 1 of 10, Broncos were 6 of 19. So significantly better. 0 of 0 fourth down efficiency. 52 total plays for the Niners, 70 were ran for the Broncos. 4 sacks allowed for both teams, 7 punts for the Niners, 10 for the Broncos. 7 penalties on the Niners, 5 on the Broncos. 2 fumbles lost on the Niners, 1 interception thrown. Time possession, 25 minutes to 34 minutes, 30 seconds, favoring the Broncos. So the Broncos basically won time possession. They won the interceptions. They won the fumbles. They took care of the football much better than the Niners did. Um, Golly, Jimmy had was 18 to 29, 211 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Russell Wilson was 20 of 33 for 184 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Cortland Sutton had 8 receptions for 97 yards. He was eating us alive last night. Debo Samuel had 5 receptions for 73 yards. If Jimmy had found him open, he probably would have had a 100-yard receiving game and a touchdown. We probably would have been probably have a different discussion today, right? We would be winning. We would be talking about Niners' great win on Sunday Night Football. So, I mean, ultimately, the reason why I'm going through these kind of numbers is the fact that I just don't understand what the fuck happened with the Niners. You come into Sunday night, you basically you come off a great win against Seattle, dominant win, 27-7. You basically had everything, all the pieces were in place for the Niners to win on Sunday Night Football, go to 2-1. It's just the offense looked flustered all night. The defense looked awesome from start to finish, but the offense just wasn't in rhythm. Jimmy was missing wide open guys. Jimmy obviously taking that safety in the end zone, and part of it's also Shanahan. Actually, a lot of it was also Shanahan for the play calling. I mean, I thought a lot of the play calling was suspect, um, including the play call where instead of before the half, the Broncos basically there was I think it was a holding call, and then it would have backed them 10 yards, but Shanahan decided to not give them another down and proceed to fourth down. And so he declined the penalty, and the Broncos then had fourth down, and then they kicked a field goal. It was 7-3 heading into halftime. And that was the score heading into halftime. And then obviously after this halftime, Jimmy commits a safety, it's 7-5, and then the Broncos are able to, and the 49ers get a field goal. It's 10-5, and the Broncos are able to get a touchdown late in the fourth quarter, and the final score is 11-10. Um, so I mean, yeah, they failed the 2-point conversion. So if the Niners had mustered any offense to get a field goal, they would have won the game. I mean, I just don't know what the hell. Jimmy in late game situations is just not reliable. Kyle Shanahan's play calling and his clock management is just horrible. This team is talented enough to win a Super Bowl. And it's funny. I was actually one of the key Jimmy defenders, heading into the season because I was actually emotionally kind of just so angry with how Jimmy and the Niners did in the NFC Championship game, but I couldn't place that loss on Jimmy because the Rams were just a superior team. right? But then last night, I mean, you didn't play a superior team. You played a struggling Broncos offense who otherwise should have lost. They should be 1-2 instead of 2-1 right now. And even though their defense was hustling to the ball and playing really good, their defense isn't as good as the Niners. In my opinion, the Niners offense. I think our weapons, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, are they're better than a lot of the guys in the Broncos defense. I mean, they're better than. I mean, obviously they got Surtain the second. They do have Chubb, but I mean Juice Check. I mean Juice Check what beat Chubb up top for for from the I think what was it the fourth quarter, right when Jimmy threw that sideline kind of dime and I mean it's we have the weapons. I think Jimmy just his late game awareness isn't there. Kyle Shanahan's play calling just isn't good. Um, the Niners are just not able to continue. I mean, Shanahan doesn't stick to kind of, I mean, he tried to run the ball last night, but eventually, if you're a one-dimensional offense, teams are going to catch up to that in the NFL, right? So, I mean, you have to start, mixing up your passing and your run plays. And I just thought a lot of things that could have went the Niners' way otherwise didn't because of the fact that Shanahan and Jimmy just did not, do what was necessary to help the Niners win the game, and it was a winnable game. I mean, there's no excuses. I feel like at this point in the season, obviously it's still early in the season, but Jimmy's been with this offensive staff for 6 years and 5 years, whatever it is, and I mean, I saw Jimmy's first start at Soldier Field, and I was really high on Jimmy. It's just and even after they lost the Super Bowl, I thought, I mean, it's a tough loss, and I'm a diehard 49ers fan, but you remember when we had these guys? I remember when we had Steve Young and Jerry. I mean, I was old enough to remember, some of the glory from the '90s 49ers days. As just like a child in the '90s, and I mean, I just don't know why. I always feel like we've always been just one quarterback away. When I say that, I mean, we did have Kaepernick, we did have Jimmy, and when Jimmy was good, he's obviously not the same player he is as he once was in 2017. Um, we had a peak Colin Kaepernick when the read option was still kind of new to the NFL and it was just basically when he was lighting up the league. We had a Jimmy Garoppolo, right, when Jimmy was basically kind of looked at as the next coming of Steve Young. And but neither one of them were Pro Bowl quarterbacks. Our last Pro Bowl quarterback was Jeff Garcia. So to put that in perspective, the last 49ers quarterback to make the Pro Bowl was Jeff Garcia in 2002. That's 20 years. 20 years. A Niners quarterback has not made the Pro Bowl. Debo was the last receiver before Debo made the Pro Bowl. Last year as a receiver, the last I think the wide receiver to make a Pro Bowl was Terrell Owens back in 2003, I think. So that was almost 18 years too, 19 years. So, back in the day, we basically had loaded rosters. The Niners were basically the most loaded team. They were the Rams, they were the Patriots, or the Buccaneers, or the Kansas City Chiefs. They had the most offensive firepower. They had the most stacked defense. They had 10 Pro Bowlers on both sides of the ball, right? But and I'm not taking away, from anything, for the past decade. I mean, the 2012 the 2022 Niners have given us some of the best playoff moments we've ever seen. Granted, there's no championships at the end of it. That doesn't necessarily negate it for me. I just want to see a team compete and win. But when you basically go into the opponent's house and you basically have them on their heels and you have a winnable game, I mean, what am I supposed to say? I can't just sit here and say, "Oh yeah, no, great effort, guys." Like, yeah, you went into a tough environment. You basically played them down the wire. No, it's not necessarily a tough environment. It's literally an environment that you basically had the opportunity to put your neck on their throats, and you basically do that countless times in the game. When Kyle Shanahan, made the decision to let the Broncos take the points, or get the points, he basically spotted them 3 points when he declined the penalty heading into halftime when he put Jimmy in shotgun, he basically literally gave away that safety because the Broncos pass rush for whatever reason. Once Trent Williams went out, they're basically getting to Jimmy every single time they wanted to at will. I understand the roster is 4-24 without Jimmy, and Kyle is sub 500 as a head coach. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I honestly am at the point where, I've seen a lot of Niners fans on Twitter basically stating the same thing that, Jimmy basically is so limited. He's a one-dimensional quarterback He only makes the dink and dunks. He only makes the safe throws. And I'm not going to sit here and debate any of that because a lot of that's founded. A lot of that's true. A lot of that's valid feedback, right? I mean, I think we ultimately need a quarterback who can push the ball down the field because guys like Debo, guys like Kittle, guys like Ayuk, their talents are being wasted, with just a dink and duck QB. Debo is getting open, wide open. He's wide open multiple times last night. Obviously Juwan Jennings, made that great catch. Jimmy threw a nice, perfect ball. So I give Jimmy credit, for being able to make some of those really tough throws. But I mean, ultimately it comes down to consistency, and ultimately it comes down to doing enough to help the team win. And then Jimmy after the game basically said that, oh, I'm not in game shape. Well, what does that mean? I mean, obviously, yeah, you haven't been playing. You didn't. I mean, you had surgery in the off season. You didn't really get to go through OTAs. You didn't get to go through a full camp, but I mean, you've been with this playbook. You've been with this roster for the past 5 years. I mean, what else is there for you to do? I mean, is it game shape that makes you like miss a wide open Debo? Is it game shape that makes you take a safety in the end zone? Is game shape not knowing where you are on the field and not knowing kind of what stage of the game you are to basically you know essentially almost throw the game. I literally thought Jimmy was throwing the game to at some points because the defense was playing so awesome. I mean, Warner, Bosa, these guys, Omenihu, um, yeah, I mean, what I forgot his name. When the other pass rusher at 96, I mean, the front four played awesome. Secondary was doing what they could. I mean, Cortland Sutton was getting open at will. So I mean, there is some I guess fine tuning, but I trust D'Amico Ryans much more than I trust Kyle Shanahan to get the defense ready because the offense is still a question mark at this point in the season because Jimmy Garoppolo is Jimmy Garoppolo, and I mean, I wish that the Niners basically kind of made like a Rams Sean McVay Les Snead decision to go and get Matt Stafford in the offseason, right? I wouldn't go and get Matt Ryan, even though Matt Ryan won on Sunday, because I mean at this point in his career, he's still not really the quarterback, that a team can really use. But I mean he can push the ball down the field much better than Jimmy can, a lot more consistently, right? Um, I mean, I think ultimately if we can get someone who can do that, and I mean I mean I wouldn't go get Jared Goff or anything like that because I mean I still think Jimmy's a little bit better. Jimmy and Goff are almost even Stevens at that point. I just think that, and I mean, honestly, I don't think Trey Lance. I mean, if we look at I mean, here's another point. I mean, if we look at the Lynch Shanahan regime and their draft record, 2017, they took Solomon Thomas and they passed on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson in that draft. 2018, actually, yeah, 2018 they took Mike McGlinchey. I'm not going to criticize that pick. I mean, McGlinchey's still pretty solid, kind of, piece on the anchor on the offensive line. 2019 was probably their best draft. Nick Bosa, Debo Samuel, right? But I mean, 2018, they still also could have gotten a Josh Allen, I mean, out of that draft, even though they locked up Jimmy. They thought Jimmy was their guy, but it is what it is. You're not going to hindsight 2020. 2020, right? Who did they get in 2020? Let me look it up. 2020 NFL draft. I already forgot who they got in 2020. Oh, I remember. Sorry, I remember. It was Javon Kinlaw, right? Kinlaw is basically proven to be now he's actually healthy, so it's fine. But last couple seasons, he hasn't been fully available. And there's a lot of talent that they passed up on that draft, to just take Kinlaw. I mean, they obviously got Ayuk, and that was a solid pick. But Kinlaw, I mean, as a first overall pick, I still question that. 2021, they passed on Jamar Chase, right? To get Trey Lance. And Kyle definitely has proved his ineptitude, to utilize Trey Lance in this offense. So, I mean, I never thought Trey Lance was the answer. I mean, when I saw him in college and when I watched him, heading into the combine, I mean, I thought maybe he could be like a late. I think he honestly would have been available in the second round at that point, or maybe even the late first round. Someone else hadn't drafted him. All the hype at that point was around Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, and this year, I mean, I mean, the Niners, I mean, Lynch and Shanahan are basically like bulky and Harbaugh. Their first round draft record is not good. And I'm not saying, and beggars can't be choosers, right? I mean, I'm not, because obviously, they put together such a great team, and this team is great. But then at the same time, if the team's talents are not being leveraged to the full, or not being optimized and leveraged to full capacity, like for example, like let's say that, you or me, we basically go to work and we miss a meeting or we attend the meeting but then the work that was expected to get done isn't done, we lose our job. We lose our job, right? And this team is supposed to be competing for a Super Bowl. They're right now they're 1-2. We'll see if they make it to the playoffs. But if they don't make the playoffs, shouldn't there be a job evaluation review, Jed York? I mean, what you fired Jim Harbaugh? He fired Jim Harbaugh with nothing besides the fact that Jim just didn't like Jim. I mean, Jim Harbaugh at that point, what, 3 NFC championships consecutive and just one 500 season? Jim Harbaugh did not have a losing season in his tenure, his 4 years in the Niners. And he got the axe. So I mean, I guess Shanahan and John Lynch, I'm sure other Niners fans trust them unequivocally, but I'm really questioning this. I'm really questioning this regime. I'm questioning really more Shanahan than anything else because I think that we need a coach who I honestly think DeMeco Ryans and maybe another young up and coming assistant. If you see what Mike McDaniel is doing in Miami, I would honestly give DeMeco Ryans the opportunity. If they were to move on for Shanahan, I would give it to DeMeco Ryans. And the reason why is because I think DeMeco Ryans proven he's more than capable to kind of manage defense. I think ultimately if they're not going to take away Shanahan's job, they should really take away the play calling ability. Someone else should be calling the plays. If someone else called the plays, then and it's less. I mean, Jason Garrett talked about it. It's less complicated, for you because when you're basically running the head coaching duties, and you have to prepare for play calling, and you have to kind of go through walkthroughs and go through all the kind of necessary kind of checkpoints to make sure that your team is prepared for game day. That's a lot of responsibility for a head coach. So it might almost be to Kyle Shanahan, Kyle's benefit, if they take away play calling duties and they basically just defer that over to someone who is who basically has the capacity. I mean, you're seeing how well Mike McDaniel is doing in Miami again, 3-0. And I don't believe the Miami Dolphins are a more talented team than the 49ers. I believe Mike McDaniel is just a better coach when it comes to just play calling and situation. And ultimately, I think I'm not going to say Shanahan's not a good coach, right? I mean, he's had playoff success, but can he do it consistently? And ultimately, I think if they were able to find a quarterback, I don't understand why we're always one quarterback away. If you remember the Super Bowl 47, right? They go to Gore 4 times, in the air instead of trying to run it because Greg Roman was a genius or thought he was, and we ended up losing the game, right? 34-31. But had they had a better quarterback, I mean, I'm not sure if Alex Smith could have been the answer at that point. Jimmy Garoppolo and Alex Smith, I see a lot of parallels in their careers and kind of how they're just game managers. And when Alex was sent over, right? When Alex was basically shipped over to Kansas City, you saw him basically have a resurgence under Andy Reid. So maybe it is just the system, But ultimately, I think the Niners are always one Pro Bowl quarterback away, one consistent Pro Bowl quarterback away from winning the championship. Um, Jimmy's a game manager, and but he was good enough to basically help the team make the Super Bowl thanks to the running game and the defense. And this team is pretty much constructed almost identically to the 2019, excuse me, 2019 team. And why can't they just find a quarterback on the market? And then maybe, I mean, there's a lot of movement in the offseason. Obviously, Jimmy, his shoulder surgery kind of screwed him, but ultimately, it comes down to kind of what the market offers right now. And I think, Jimmy being on the roster for 6.5 million, it's still a pretty good kind of deal. But I mean, this offseason, they should really explore options. I don't know if I mean, it's probably not going to be in the draft. I mean, if Stroud is your best option in the draft, then I mean, I'm not, I'm never. I mean, if you've seen how Ohio State quarterbacks perform, you look at Justin Fields. I mean, he's not a good quarterback. He's not. The dual threat quarterback, maybe like on Lamar Jackson or that type. That those are rare to find. The quarterbacks who can play from the pocket and can run and are just freak athletes who are basically anomalies, like a Josh Allen. That's also an anomaly, right? He's the best quarterback of the 2018 draft. All the quarterbacks taken before him, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, all of them have basically proven to be busts or just game kind of managers, sub 500 journeyman quarterbacks. So it's difficult to draft a good quarterback. I mean, once you find that guy, you want to lock him up. Jimmy's in the last year of his deal. So let's see. I mean, ultimately, I don't I don't really want to. I don't think I'm going to cover the Niners anymore this on this podcast unless a miracle happens. Maybe if they beat the Chiefs, maybe if they make a deep playoff run again, or I don't know. But ultimately, I mean, just with the ineptitude and kind of just the lack of consistency we've seen in game week one, we've seen now week three. Um, there's a lot of reasons for me not even to watch. I actually read that comment on Twitter. It's like, oh my God, like, pretty much the Niners, right? I mean, someone said, can the team just basically start Brock Purdy, let Jimmy sit, and basically then we don't have to watch the team. See, I'm almost in the mindset where it's like, back in the late 2000s, if anyone remembers Niners in the 2000s, they were just after Garcia and Owens, they were just god awful, right? With Alex Smith, all the different offensive coordinator changes, the lack of stability. It was fun to watch that team win a game because they weren't expected to win anything. But it's really difficult to watch this team lose a game when they're expected to win everything because they have the talent, they have the roster, and they have the credibility and the expectations to go out and win games, right? So I just don't know. I think ultimately, I mean, I will still watch them, but I'm probably not going to cover them anymore on the podcast. Probably not going to post about them anymore on Twitter or Instagram, unless something great happens, or I mean, sorry, not Instagram. I don't have Instagram anymore. I'm not using Instagram. I use LinkedIn. But anyways, guys, I mean, that's just my rant on this morning about the Niners loss. I'll probably spend after tomorrow, once I've confirmed my fantasy wins, I'll probably do a fantasy episode. So that will be the majority of the podcast. If it's not interviews or other topics, then I'll probably be talking about fantasy and just overall NFL action instead of just the Niners because this is just pathetic. All right. Thank you all for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. And if you feel differently, or if you have any other thoughts, feel free to comment. And please share, please subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, DDOG Podcast. I'm Austin signing off. Take care.